well-regulated militia be necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I'm glad that you are with us today. I have a little bit of an audible here. Our guest that was going to join us, Rick Hector, unable to do so we'll see if we can get Rick back with us on the program. Hoping to talk with Rick in the very near future, perhaps as early as tomorrow, about what happened over the weekend in Detroit, Michigan, where he hosted his annual gun safety course, and hundreds of individuals turned out to get some free gun training. So thank you to Rick Hector for doing that. Now, I will say that we've got a couple of things to talk about, including a special session that's underway in the state of Virginia, a special legislative session that's kicked off today. There was a lot of thinking that there was going to be some gun control involved in this special session because House Bill 961, which is Governor Ralph Northam's gun ban, magazine ban, and suppressor ban, failed in the regular legislative session. 4 Senate Democrats said, nope, can't sign on to this particular language, but we're open to tweaks. And in the past few weeks, I've actually heard rumors that one of those 4 state senators had been circulating a draft of a tweaked version of that bill. I've not seen that filed, however, and the session starts today. So as of right now, there are no gun control bills that have been filed. There are a couple of pro-gun bills that have been filed. We'll get to that in a second. But I suspect, and I wrote about this at bearingarms.com earlier today, I suspect that Democrats in Virginia really want to avoid this issue between now and Election Day. They don't want to bring this up in November. Now, no state lawmakers are on the ballot. We have our state elections next year. But there are a couple of competitive congressional races, and even the U.S. Senate race. Mark Warner is up for election facing Daniel Gade. And I think Warner's favored in that, but I think Democrats want to tamp down on the gun control talk before November. In Virginia's 2nd congressional district, represented by freshman Democrat Elaine Luria, and in Virginia's 7th congressional district, represented by freshman Democrat Abigail Spanberger, both of those districts are Republican-leaning. Both have strong Republican challengers, and both of the Democrats who were elected for the first time in 2018, they voted for an assault weapons ban in Congress in 2019, but you can't find any mention of that on their campaign websites. Even if you click on the section under issues titled gun violence, they don't talk about that gun ban vote. I wonder why that would be. Perhaps it's because that issue is not nearly as popular as they were led to believe by anti-gun groups like Moms Demand Action and Everytown for Gun Safety. So I think the Democrats have wised up. I think they've gotten smart here before the election, at least politically cognizant of the fact that fully embracing the anti-gun agenda of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will hurt them in November at the polls. Now, I happen to also think that avoiding the issue isn't going to work. Gun owners are aware. We are awake. We're not going back to sleep. And I suspect that it is going to be an uphill climb for Abigail Spanberger and Elaine Luria as they fight for re-election based on their embrace of the Biden-Harris gun control agenda. Although, I will say this, the New York Times has a story today, actually, I guess this was on Monday, the rage moms that Democrats are counting on. They write, President Bill Clinton introduced America to the soccer mom anxiously shuttling her children across swing state suburbs in her minivan. President George W. Bush's re-election campaign found another cutesy moniker, dubbing those voters worried about terrorism after the attacks of September 11th, security moms. So who are the rage moms? Well, the Times says that President Trump's handling of the pandemic is generating an entirely different sentiment, one not traditionally bestowed upon female voters or mothers. Senator Patty Murray, the highest-ranking woman in Senate leadership, says, quote, I am a rage mom. Well, a rage nana at this point, as my granddaughter would say. Okay, so first of all, I mean, if the first person you find is a member of the Democratic leadership, then I'm guessing perhaps this movement is not nearly as organic as the New York Times is portraying it to be. They say, quote, with millions of American families facing an uncertain start to the school year, the struggle for childcare, education, and economic stability is fueling a political uprising built on the anger of women who find themselves constantly and indefinitely expected to be teacher, caregiver, employee, and parent. Okay, now, again, I'm not disputing that there are plenty of women out there who feel that way. I would also venture a guess, though, that over the past 6 or 7 months, there have been plenty of guys that have felt that way as well. And again, I'm not sure that necessarily translates directly into Joe Biden will save us, right? I mean, listen, many of us are dealing with, okay, what do we do with our kids over the course of the summer? Or maybe our school's returning virtually. I got to go back to work. I can't work from home. So what do I do with my kid? There are a lot of us who are dealing with that. But the idea that you can pin the blame entirely on the Trump administration, as opposed to, I don't know, the behavior of Americans, including in a lot of deep blue Democrat-controlled cities, and younger voters, by the way, who are apparently driving right now, the increase in the coronavirus, and young voters, according to the polls, are strongly in favor of Joe Biden. Again, I'm not sure that the rage mom, I'm sure it's a real push by Democrats. I won't call it a real movement. I'm sure it's a real thing that Democrats are trying to pursue. And I'm sure they want to, throw again the blame on President Trump. But when you look at what the rage moms are supposedly raging out about, a lot of it comes back to the left, or at least voting blocs that traditionally side with the left. Kim Lopez, mother of 3 in Glendale, Arizona, part-time financial assistant who's still unsure what her children's schooling will look like this year, said she never considered herself political until this summer when she brought her children to a small Black Lives Matter protest in the Phoenix suburbs. She says, quote, "There's nobody giving us solutions. It's as if they don't care what happens to families." I think that let's put it this way. I'm not sure that a lot of government bureaucrats care what happens to families. I'm not sure that the answer to that is more government. Right? New York Times says Ms. Lopez is exactly the kind of voter Democrats hope will push them to victory in November, and they are aiming to turn that frustration into government inaction with a vote against Mr. Trump. And of course, the New York Times, they tie this back, the rage moms, to groups like Moms Demand Action. They say in recent years, mothers turned activists have begun political organizations, including Moms Rising, Vote Like a Mother, and Moms Demand Action. The majority of volunteers with Indivisible, a liberal advocacy group that helped propel several Democrats to Congress in 2018, are women, and the topic of childcare has become a de facto part of many meetings across the country. Okay, again, all of that may be true, but none of that is happening in a vacuum, is it? So for every wall of moms that shows up at a Portland protest, and by the way, it's important to note now that the violence that we're seeing in Portland, even the quote-unquote wall of moms aren't vocally on board with that violence, saying, okay, this undercuts what we're trying to do. So even folks on the left are getting a little fed up with folks on the hard left, right, for the continued violence that is just getting worse, it seems, in these deep blue Democrat-controlled cities. Now, they're not going to go out there and protest the far left violence. They're still going to go out there and protest the police because they're not stupid. And again, this ultimately is an election year, and so it's all political. So they're not about to do much to undercut the left. They want to try to portray unity, right, and solidarity with folks. But it's hard to do that when people keep getting kicked in the head and knocked unconscious and violently assaulted and police officers injured. It's at some point, those rage moms here. Well, let me put it another way. By the time we get to November, how many Americans are going to be sick and tired of a small group of people who exist and are fueled by rage? I'm guessing that most voters will view that as a turnoff, not a reason to go out and vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. As for gun control, again, I have to think that a lot of the new gun owners we're seeing here, I mean, this is based anecdotally on what we've seen from like the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We spoke to Tiffany Teasdale from Linwood Guns and Ammo in Washington State a little while ago. And my conversations with local gun stores in the state of Virginia. What we're hearing anecdotally is for, your average gun store, somewhere between 40 and 60% of your customers right now are new gun owners. Right? And somewhere between 40 and 60% of those customers, of your total customers, are female gun owners. Many of them, again, for the very first time. So you talk about, or the New York Times writes about the rage mom phenomena. And I don't know how large this is, but I would say that there is another phenomena that the New York Times is not going to want to write about. And that's the defense moms. I think maybe a slight variation of the security moms, which the New York Times referenced, in 2004. That was more national security. This is more personal security. These moms see the violence and the unrest in the streets, both the political violence that we're seeing in places like Portland and Seattle, New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C., but then also the rising level of street crime. Again, homicides up nearly 100% in New York City. Homicides up more than 30% in Philadelphia. Homicides up in Portland, Oregon. Homicides up in Chicago, Illinois. Record-setting pace for homicides in Baltimore, Maryland. They see this rise in street crime as well as the unrest on the streets. And their response is not, ooh, can't wait till Joe Biden's in the White House because then things are going to be better. Their response is, what the hell is going on in these places? All right, this is terrifying if Joe Biden gets in the White House. Now, a lot of these women may have already gone to the gun store. They may have already picked up their very first gun. They may be planning on doing so once, some of them may have actually been making repeat trips, hoping to find a gun that they like at the gun store because the selection is rather limited these days. But I think this is a real phenomenon as well. And the longer this unrest continues, the longer Democrat mayors in places like Portland and New York and Chicago continue to wring their hands and, we don't know what to do. But don't send more federal law enforcement in here, Donald Trump. As long as they fail to keep the peace in their cities, every day that this violence and unrest continues, I think another defense mom or 2 or 10 are created. This is not the future that many Americans want for this country. When you look at what's going on in Portland, Oregon every night, when you look at the looting or the violence in Chicago, or God forbid, even in Madison, Wisconsin, where an 11-year-old girl was shot and killed during a drive-by shooting, 2 19-year-olds taken into custody. That's not the world that most of us want, but that is the world that Democrats are creating in these cities that they have controlled again for decades. Now, of course, you can say, well, this is Donald Trump's America. Okay, remember back when John Edwards ran for president? That was in 2004, right? And he talked about 2 Americas. And then Barack Obama famously countered that in 2008 with his red, white, and blue America. I think you can say that there are divergent views here of what this country should look like. This is one of the reasons why this country is so politically divided and so deeply divided. And yes, this is happening in Donald Trump's America, but it's also happening in Lori Lightfoot's Chicago and in Ted Wheeler's Portland and in Bill de Blasio's New York, right? So you can't pin all of this on Donald Trump, particularly when Democrats are refusing the help of the Trump administration to deal with this violent crime. Once they've done that, then they're accepting responsibility for what happens in their cities. And what's happening in their cities is chaos. That chaos does not breed, I think, a large number of Biden voters. I think the rage moms, again, may largely fizzle out by November. But the defense moms, I suspect, will remain strong. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We're going to start there. I don't even know if this is actually a full-blown recidivist report. I'm not sure of the criminal history of this individual. I do know that he just got a sweetheart plea deal. Defendant in fatal drive-by shooting makes offered plea. The headline doesn't really do the story justice. This is from the Mojave Daily News, Kingman, Arizona. A Bullhead City, Arizona man pleaded guilty last Friday to his connection to a November drive-by shooting that left a man dead. 23-year-old Brent Ryan Seekle pleaded guilty per an offered plea to facilitation of a drive-by shooting as well as hindering prosecution. Now, an offered plea is where a defendant pleads guilty while continuing to assert their innocence, but acknowledging that evidence presented by the prosecution would likely lead to their conviction. So he's not acknowledging guilt, but he says acknowledging, they've got evidence that would probably convict me. Seekle had been charged with first-degree murder. 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault, as well as a drive-by shooting for his part in the death of Kevin Castro Hurtado. Under the plea agreement, you ready for this? Again, charged with first-degree murder, 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder. Superior Court Judge Billy Sipe Jr. will sentence Siegel to supervised probation. Yeah, supervised probation. Sentencing scheduled for September 17th. Sipe said he will either accept or reject the plea agreement at the sentencing. I hope he rejects it. That's absolutely ridiculous. Hurtado's sister and wife both spoke in court opposing the plea agreement. Hurtado's wife, who was injured in the shooting, said that Siegel was the instigator and signaled to Siegel's co-defendant, Benji Jr. Nunez, by honking his horn. Hurtado's sister said Siegel should prove his innocence at trial. The Deputy Mojave County Attorney Rod Albright said that Siegel had hindered prosecution by concealing the identity of Benji Nunez. He also said there was evidence that there was communication between Siegel and Nunez and that Siegel knew about the intent to murder Hurtado prior to the crime. So again, why offer the plea deal? We're going to keep our eyes on this story because I just have a hard time seeing how somebody goes from first-degree murder charges to walking away with probation as I slap on the wrist to a guilty plea. But there you go. In Kingman, Arizona, Brent Siegel is the subject of today's, again, not a recidivist report. It's just the deal of the day. All right, on to our armed citizen story of the day. Again, sort of a generic headline from Lake Charles, Louisiana, where a resident fatally shot a suspected burglar. According to the Lake Charles police, officials called to the Suffolk Manor Apartments for a burglary and a shooting. They say they found a person broke into an apartment and was shot by the person living there. The person who was shot later died, according to police. Literally all of the details we have at the moment. This occurred in the early morning hours of Tuesday, August the 18th, so we'll see if we can get some more details here in the hours to come. Finally today, our good deed of the day. From Union County, North Carolina, first day back at school, and a Union County Sheriff's deputy saved an elementary student from possibly choking to death on a pear. Deputy A.J. Wallace making his rounds through Wingate Elementary School's cafeteria about 7:45 Monday morning. He noticed a teacher grabbing a young student by the stomach as if he was choking. Deputy said the student wasn't getting oxygen because his airway was completely blocked. Wallace had recently completed his CPR recertification. He performed a total of 12 abdominal thrusts until a piece of pear was freed from the student's throat. Yeah, some scary stuff. When you're choking, you can't breathe. That's the real deal. Sheriff Eddie Cathy says our school resource officers wear many hats, not just that of a law enforcement officer. Having well-trained first responders in our schools not only is a crime deterrent, but officers are there to help students and staff deal with all kinds of emergencies. Well, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing because he took his CPR recertification. Deputy A.J. Wallace, we thank you, sir, for your very good deed. That is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. Want to thank you for being a part of the program today. As always, don't forget you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. That way you never miss a program. You can also subscribe via your favorite podcast platform, whatever it might be. Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're there. Bearing Arms Cam & Company. That's just what you look for. Until we talk again, be well, be safe, be free, and we'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.